I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I live today, the Gubbi Gubbi, Kabi Kabi people, and the Jinnabara people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Okay, I've got several things happening here. Big mess, but so this is my palette. It's all dried up. I thought I'd show you before I re-wetted it and put some fresh paper. So that's got all dried paint on it. Hopefully you can see that. It's got dried paint on it, and I may be able to use some of that and collage it onto another painting. I don't always keep it, but I particularly like many of the colours here, so that's why I'm thinking maybe I will. This has got, these are called shop towels or something, but you know, a soft cloth which you wet with water, and then you put a sheet of baking paper or tracing paper over the top. So I'll do that shortly. But I wanted to show you also what I've got happening is I took a photo when I had my still lifey things set up on my bench, and I created this little table setting with my little miniature chairs and then a blue plate with lemons. So I'm loving the, I don't know, would you say juxtaposition of the, for the eye, because this doesn't make sense, and that's why I like it. And then I've just sort of drawn that in. So this was yesterday. I wasn't sure what to do, and I wanted to start practicing more on paper to help me loosen up and get freer and freer. That's my intention. So now I've come into the studio and I've set up over there just a bit of wood, a tub of paint, my little chairs, and then my vase. And how about that vase? Oh, I bought that in Sydney at a florist when we had a weekend with our two daughters. We went to Sydney and went to the Matisse exhibition, and you know, it's a flight from our place from Brisbane to Sydney, and so what do? I go and buy a glass vase, which I had to then carry around and be really careful, and find a supermarket gave me a carton, and I was able to package it up and bring it home. But because it was green and glass, I just loved it so much. And I had the idea that I want to start doing more still life. So I wanted to talk about what's in that vase. It's left over from a bunch of flowers, those greenery on the edge. They look like there's some sort of citrus, and I've left them in the water, and now they've started growing roots. So I'm just leaving them. There's dead gum leaves, and then there's this burgundy kind of colored plant, sort of burgundy reddish sort of one with these little budsy things, and that's just been in there now sort of for weeks. I just change the water every now and again, and I just love it how it's just giving me a bit of greenery random to work with. And up in that jug, you'll see that appearing in a number of my little paintings lately because it's here. And I love the way those slender little leaves fall. And just these two things alone make me happy because of all of the differences in the shapes of the leaves and things. And then throw in these little chairs, and I don't know, it just makes me really happy. So now I've got set up here, I've got two pieces of watercolor paper, and so one I have started with a bit of a sketch, which I rarely do. I don't like having to draw something and then paint it. I prefer to start with a mess and then find a painting in it. So I'm going to try both here and maybe video some of the process. So what I'm thinking is I'll need to sort of mess up that page on the right. And I'm sorry about the lighting, it feels very yellowy. I'll see if I can adjust it when I edit this video, but that's what I've discovered, that my Perspex wall throws a lot of yellow light, which is actually causing me a bit of issue when I take photos of art, or even as I'm looking at my art, like that big one there. It might not look as dirty and yellow out in the daylight as it does to me now, and that's a whole nother story for another time. That one, I can't even go there right now. So, oh, here we go. There's our little Aura. She doesn't come in all that much lately. She goes and sits down outside. Hi, so I'm using a combination of ink and quite fluid paint, and I'm just going to mess up that page with mark making, bit of wash, very spontaneous, the marks I'm making. Pretty much trying to cover everywhere in case I cover over areas later. I'll want some pattern coming through, but I have no idea what's going to happen on that page yet. This I'm just loosely colouring in, kind of mixing things on the palette as I go, and just roughly, loosely holding the brush and bringing in the elements that I had drawn on. Really trying to bring looseness into something that was sort of pre-drawn is different, and I find not so easy, but inks are quite lovely how they drip and do their own thing. So then I'm just going to sketch in the drawing of the table, of the setting that I've got set up. Again, holding the pencil loosely to try and get a loose feeling about the lines, although they're only in pencil, so they'll not be the end result generally. Although I do love all the differences of lines. I like pencil line with ink drawing or ink page. So sometimes I might leave pencil drawing, and in that case I'll probably seal it with a bit of matte medium smeared over it with the palette knife, just so it doesn't loosen if I want to varnish later. It's just getting in these little chairs. It's quite fun with chairs. It's almost like, well, doesn't really matter how messy they are, everyone knows what they are, so it's sort of like, it's not abstract, but it's sort of loose. I'm not into realism. It doesn't do it, and I haven't got the patience for it. I think that's probably a big thing to do with it too. I notice how quite impatient I am actually when it comes to sketchbooking and working on paper. I enjoy the start, the messy start, and then I seem to be in quite a hurry to finish. So that's something I've been observing with the sketchbook practice. And so I can be aware of that, and sometimes it might pay me to slow down. And I'm also aware of how I'm feeling when I'm doing the art, and if the feeling is not the sort of feeling I want to put in the work, if I start to feel tired or bored or it's not quite in harmony or something, I will take a rest. I'll go away. I'll leave it. Maybe stop painting for the day, whatever. Because I want to be quite aware of the energy that I'm putting into my work. Again, but with sketchbooks, you don't have to be so concerned, I think, perhaps, because you know it's not going to be going out into the world or whatever. So it's really interesting, all the differences that sketchbook work offers, the different way your mind holds it. It's fascinating. And I'm just smitten. There's, again, my green vase shape. Okay, I'm showing you the black paint. Might even black paint or black gesso, one or the other. Just some plain black paint. And it's sort of a messy-ish brush, which, so, you kind of almost can't help but to have a messy result when you choose a messy brush. So I think I might have chosen that on purpose, wanting to have those loosish lines. But you might see later, I think I can't help myself, and it ends up being a little more controlled than maybe it started out. Because when I see those lines loose like that there, I quite love them. So again, observing, what do I love? What makes me feel alive? That's what I am wanting to have in my art, what makes me feel alive. And even the surface of that table is kind of gorgeous, but you'll see soon I decide to paint over it, because when you have too much of a thing, then it maybe doesn't get noticed. So, but having said that, I love how that background is messy at the moment, and at the end of this painting I don't think I'm as pleased with what I ended up doing with the background. So again, this is why working on paper or in a sketchbook is so helpful for learning what you love and how you love your work to look. So I'm using these works on paper all as practice for me, finding out what do I love, or what do I love now. What I love in my work now is probably different to what I loved 5 years ago, and in 5 years from now, who knows what I'll love. But as I look at this now, I'm noticing how I love seeing line work. I love it so much. I love high contrast. The black chairs against the very pale background, I love that very much. And I really love those loose, spontaneous marks of the ink. And so I want to find a way that I can have more of that in my finished work. I'm sort of in a habit, maybe, which is I think what I end up doing here, of choosing the loose marks end up being either in the items or the background, and I find it tricky to leave them in both, because if it's spontaneous and messy everywhere, it can be too much of a good thing. But now, as you'll see, that I'm starting to bring in what would be sort of like the main table surface that these items are sitting on, and you start to see the spontaneous marks disappearing. It's sort of quietening it all down, and it's debatable as to what wins too much, what's too much noise in the background, because when you quiet an area, it allows another part to show up. So choosing your heroes in the painting is all part of you working out what you love. So I've got quite a few, you could say, characters or people at this party. There's the chair and table set, there's the vase with the water and the leaves, there's a jug with more leaves. So there's 3 main characters, but who is the loudest? Who is the most sort of important in this piece for me? It's really quite lovely for me to be seeing this and really discussing it with you, because as I'm talking about it, I'm looking at it newly and freshly and loving how that tabletop looks like it's a mirrored surface. And you'll see soon how that changes so much when that's lost. Yeah, so I wonder in other ones how I might try leaving an interesting surface on a table. That might happen in a future work. I love how I drew those leaves with a loose hold on the pencil. The more I draw them, the sort of, it's like I have that muscle memory of how I like drawing them and quite enjoy doing that. The feeling of drawing leaves, something about it. So then I'm coming in again, like I say, with the background. So I'm using some of the colour blue and maybe Payne's grey that I've used in the ink, and then I've put that with white. So a bit of everything is in with it, and I think it's a little dark. So I do it once and then let's see. I'm making sure I've got all my leaves in place before I do the rest of the table, because I love the spontaneity of the marks when I'm using it now. Yeah, so then I'm sort of quieting down the tabletop again, and I think maybe I overdid it, went too far. I think at the time I must have been thinking, it's all too busy, it needs to be quiet. Or you get in your mind this idea of that fresh white tablecloth, and it's really attractive. It's something you always see, in the lovely fancy restaurants or whatever. There's a beautiful crisp white tablecloth, and you think everything just looks magical on that. I don't know what was going on for me to keep going over the tablecloth. Yeah. I leave gaps in the recording because if there's nothing to say. Here we go. I thought, it needs something. See, now that I'd emptied it by whitening it too much, I needed to mess it back up. So this wasn't all that successful, but I had painted myself into a corner, literally, and so I must have decided, all right, I'll keep going. And so then I've got yellowy coloured there, so I needed yellowy everywhere. Yeah, so this isn't how it ends up either, but here it is at another stage. So then I'm checking, what happens if I paint the table black? And I decided it needed it because there was too much patterning everywhere else. And with that holding up the little piece, I decided it did look pretty good. See, I could have been clever and left a slash of that white. Would have looked like a great, like a reflection of light. That could have been interesting to leave that. But I was on a bit of a roll with a big brush and decided to put lots of table legs and everything, and then thought, no, actually, too much. Take those back off. And then while it was wet, I thought I'd sort of sgraffito some little things on the table, but it was drying so quick I sort of almost ran out of time. But that gives you a little bit of a quiet conversation in the dark, which I do like. Trying desperately to make a bowl that would fit in with what I've got going. I don't dislike it there in this image. There you go, I'm trying to make the background a bit less blue, more neutral. And then I've brought in a blue jug using ink, I think. Oh, and then I've gone in more. Let's quiet and quiet and quiet, and see how it's quietening the background. And it's debatable whether it gets too quiet, but it does. Can you see how it makes the leaves stand out more? Okay, I must have decided that was it for now. And I've gone over to this one. And just using a Neo Colour 2 watercolour crayon, and decided I would draw on a tablecloth because I quite love the marks of crayon as opposed to painting, having the two different textures. I really love that. And I'm probably trying to loosen things up a little bit as well. And then the drip of the lemon, I loved that, so I think I left it. Just yummy, juicy paint. That is water on the Neo Colour crayon. See how it's water soluble. And I thought I'd get excited and do gingham, and then realised, nah, that'd be too much. Cute little cup. And then I've gone back and decided actually not loving how that bowl is working, so I decided I would bring in another chair to sort of bring something into that quite big empty space that was there. I tell myself I quite like big empty spaces to breathe, but there are times when it doesn't always work. And then I've used a permanent pen to just do that rough drawing of it. Yeah. Could have left it like that as a difference too, I guess, but I decided I would paint it. So it's quite a wet brush, so it doesn't really come out as messy as the other. The other chairs up the top have got a bit more of a dry brush sort of surface look. Yeah. Touching it up a little bit. I made up those legs on the table, so yeah. Whether the I think it's coming to finish soon. Yes, and as you see, I've got a bit more white, a bit of yellow mixed, and a really big brush so that I do paint loosely. Interesting. So the background changed quite a few times. And I was thinking That white background there probably is quite nice, but I must have decided, oh, it doesn't look quite finished, so I thought I'd try a wash. So a really pale grey wash. And working with it upside down so that if it dripped, it wasn't going to go all down the painting that I'd already done. Yeah, working on watercolour paper, so different to working on canvas and wood. Oops, I just too much dripping. Quick, do it back again. And then I thought, oh, I better put a bit of colour in those leaves. See how there's just such a difference between the leaves on the spontaneous one and the other one when you just draw them and colour them in. It might be okay, but it's a difference. I wanted to include things in my videos that bring me joy, and I was thinking it would be nice to share the occasional oracle cards and things with you, but I had the idea today that little Dee Dee would love me to pull a card of hers. So little Dee Dee is sort of like an inner child kind of character of mine, but she's sort of, for want of a better word, a bit more advanced than just being a little child. She and I don't know, it's hard to explain, but she's, you know, a little being that channels light and wisdom as well as very innocent, childish. You know, it's like, I guess we all have inner selves, inner parts, and so she came about by me wanting to be able to draw without judging a little character. It became about, actually, the longest story is that it came about close to when my mum was passing, and I got the urge to take a journal with me and do little drawings and document the last week of Mum's life as it felt for me inside. So I've shared about that kind of a bit more extensively. I made a Creativity Time for Grief course. So that's kind of where she started. So that was back in 2016. And so this little deck is lots of little drawings that I've made of her since. So I thought it might be fun to just pick a few and see which ones we get. All right, well, there's two there. I've not done this before in public, like sharing a little reading of hers. So this day she was in a hurry. Simply can't stop today, things to do. She's running away with a little scarf. So this must have been a little series, but it says, I also notice that too much information coming from the outside can make me feel tired. It's a balance. You need quiet to hear your still small voice and take a nap. How about that? That's 2019 by the look of it. And I was sharing that message in last week's video. So that back around it comes. And this one, nothing quite like a brisk morning walk in the cool air to blow the cobwebs away, awakening the senses. And that's back in 2017. So that could have been 2017. So, you know, that listening to too much information has obviously, it's a big part of me and how I roll and how I get very tired.